continuing the discussion on world affairs with Pete Santilli of the Pete Santilli Show. Pete, Paris Climate Change Summit is upon us. Apparently they're going to be calling for some emergency action. What are the details?
It's emergency action, but of course we understand the pattern that the globalists operate. They call it the Hegelian dialectic, the problem, reaction, solution. Of course, they know what a reaction is to the potential for climate change disaster to cause fear, and then, of course, creating that emergency to usher in this huge emergency legislation that essentially they've been working on for 30 or 40 years. They've been having all these panels. They've even referred to some of the climate change data and some of the measurements that they've had indicating that we have a problem in the world with climate change. They've called it a fraud. Now, this emergency is upon us, something they've been working towards for 30 or 40 years. And this major emergency where they have to get this legislation in should be signed off next week. Little is known about the panels that have been put together with all of these United Nations agencies and committees that have been formed. They all have an acronym for them, but they've all been convening over the past 30, 40 years. All of their reports will roll up to this Paris Climate Change Summit. And they're going to try to get consensus among all of the world leaders and sign off on this stuff. There's various elements of it, such as geoengineering, that they intend to discuss next month, and I've got some information about that as well.
Now, speaking of global leaders meeting, Vladimir Putin just came out and said that global warming is a fraud. A new study just was released stating that the polar ice caps are in fact increasing in size. So how do you think that those facts are going to be swept under the rug, if you will, at this next summit?
I would say the main focus, based on my research, the main focus that we need to put on the fraud itself is that even knowing that some of the data is skewed, it's false data. It's been manipulated for the benefit of creating this new global economy to support Al Gore's carbon tax credits, of course. But the biggest fraud that's taking place right now is that none of this data includes the impact of geoengineering on the Arctic and the sea levels. They're not including the impact of our spraying that we've been doing over 65 years. I would say that is the biggest fraud that's being perpetrated on the entire world. So yes, I agree with Vladimir Putin, but it's even more fraudulent that they don't include geoengineering data.
Now, how does geoengineering play into the climate change hoax?
Geoengineering, the spraying that they're doing, and they're actually justifying the spraying. They're calling it solar radiation management, but they're essentially doing weather modification, spraying particulates into the air, changing the jet streams and the traffic flow per se of the weather patterns.
So basically, are you saying that they're going to legalize chemical spraying in the air, chemtrailing?
This is what I've read. Now, also, one of the foremost experts on geoengineering, his name is Dane Wigington. He told me, believe it or not, that the climate change impact of geoengineering over the past 65 years has actually made the situation even worse than what they're reporting with regular climate change data. They intend to essentially legalize. I'm anticipating they're going to do it at the Paris Climate Change Summit. He says they may not be able to do it because of the revolt that will take place, but they will essentially legalize it under a different name.
Is it more or less like, okay, we know they've been spraying for however many years. Aside from, I guess, legalizing is probably not the right term. Is it more like, coming out of the shadows with it and admitting it?
Calling it solar radiation management, they actually have had these committees, and this has been going on since 2011, 2013. Solar radiation management governance initiatives have indicated that the political process has not been moving along quickly enough, and they need to apply solar radiation management techniques such as, and they call it chemtrail spraying. They're just calling it something different, and that's what they intend to, what I anticipate they will approve in the Paris Climate Change Summit.